Financial argument. Follow us on YouTube.
This is True News, uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. A U.S. B-52 nuclear bomber will drop dummy bombs this Saturday near the Russian border. Moscow vows to respond to America sending a U.S. destroyer to the Black Sea. French commandos have boots on the ground inside Syria. A former Fed president says all his rich buddies are hoarding cash. And Wall Street's bond-selling king warns that the world is facing a $10 trillion supernova explosion of negative yield bonds. These are just some of the stories we'll discuss today on True News, your independent, listener-supported Christian news talk program. Let's start with the B-52 story. This Saturday, a U.S. B-52 long-range nuclear bomber will drop dummy mines over the water to test its targeting skills during a major war exercise in Europe. The bomber is being improved with upgrades, new software, and weapons, according to Air Force Times. That's why mission planners and commanders say the B-52 brings more to the table during the exercises ongoing in the Baltics, Finland, Sweden, Poland, and Germany over the next few weeks. Air Force Times says dropping mines is something the B-52 is capable of, but doesn't often get a chance to do it, according to Colonel Kiernan Dinahan, an operations group commander, who said, quote, "We'll be dropping 500-pound dummy mines set up like a real mine with a tail kit and employment characteristics, but it's just concrete," according to Lieutenant Colonel Michael McGinnis. Air Force Times says the two B-52 strategic bombers from Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota, landed last week in the United Kingdom. A third bomber has since joined them. The job will be to hit their sea targets. The same thing will be done during the U.S. Army Europe-led Sabre strikes, working with joint terminal attack controllers on the ground. Edward, how do you think the Russians are going to take to U.S. B-52 nuclear bomber pretending it's dropping nuclear bombs near the Russian border?
Well, they're not going to take too kindly to that. That's a direct provocation against the sovereignty of Russia.
I mean, that's like going down to the bar and walking around in the parking lot firing a revolver in the air.
Oh, not just a revolver. It's like firing a bazooka in the air. This is a B-52 Stratospheric bomber. These bombers are used in nuclear war. They could have done this the mine landing and exercise with many different crafts. They could have used the A-110 gunship. They could have used smaller craft. They could have used armored personnel carriers to drop these mines.
And they didn't even have to do it there.
Right. Not on the border with Russia.
Right.
They chose to use the one aircraft, which is seen ubiquitously throughout the world as a nuclear deterrent.
So two things. The U.S. is deliberately sending a message to Russia. We are prepared to drop nuclear warheads on you.
Yes.
And number two, the Russian military is going to have to stay up all night wondering if this exercise is going to go live.
Right. It absolutely could go live, right? The amount of troops, the amount of armaments that they have right now positioned.
I mean, if the Russians just say, well, this is an exercise, we're going to go to sleep tonight, we're not going to worry about it, within minutes, that B-52 could be over Moscow.
Sure.
This is dangerous.
Very dangerous.
Very dangerous. Once again, the U.S. is provoking Russia to start World War III. We don't see the Russians dropping dummy bombs in Mexico.
No, of course not. Or off the coast of New Jersey or something like that.
Just think what we would be talking about today.
Sure.
If the Russians were using their Tupolev Bear bombers to drop dummy nuclear bombs in the ocean along the American Atlantic coast.
Right.
Everybody would be in a state of frenzy. They're getting ready to nuke us. They're telling us right to our face, we're coming to get you.
I mean, and it's not like we don't have areas where we would test these things. We have deserts all throughout our own country. We have open ocean. Any of these military leaders who dare to attempt to sell to the public, this is just us testing our capabilities. It's an absolute lie.
U.S. warships entering the Black Sea will prompt response measures from Moscow, a top Russian diplomat has warned, adding that another U.S. aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean is clearly an attempt to show force ahead of an upcoming NATO summit. That's the opening paragraph from RT Russia Today. Andrei Kalin, the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry's European Cooperation Department, told Novosti News in Moscow, quote, American warships do enter the Black Sea now and then. Certainly, this does not meet with Russia's approval and will undoubtedly lead to planning response measures. He said there is nothing special about the movement of U.S. vessels in this case. We know that aircraft carriers are moving in the Mediterranean and elsewhere. They have a right to do so. This is freedom of navigation. But in general, this is a definite increase in U.S.-Russia relations, and all this is done ahead of the NATO summit in Warsaw. This is a demonstration of force. So you put this together with a B-52 dropping, actually 3 B-52s dropping dummy bombs along the Russian border.
Right.
Again, what do you think the Russians are going to think? They have no other choice but to conclude that the U.S. and NATO is planning a first strike on Russia. And we're begging them to attack us. And I think the attack is going to be an EMP on the USA.
And what's surprising to me, Pastor Rick, is how this isn't in the news at all. I mean, this should be headline news. It really should be. But it's so buried. It's so deep. I mean, no one knows about this unless they listen to
But you know about
news.
Caitlyn Jenner.
That's right.
And for our listeners in Canada, if an EMP goes off, you're out. Lights are out for you too, including your Supreme Court that just legalized bestiality.
Yep.
You Canadians are just as wayward as the Americans. You've lost your mind too. Okay, we now know that there are French commandos in Syria. French special forces in northern Syria are assisting Kurdish-led militia in a drive to retake a pocket of territory west of the Euphrates River. French news agency AFP reports the commandos are not participating in combat and are restricted to advisory and training roles. Of course, all these commandos are always there just to advise. Hey, we just stopped in to give you some friendly advice on how to kill the Russians.
Right. And it's like precedent before this. We know the special forces of Canada, United States, and Britain have silently, it was almost overnight, transitioned from advisory to support combat roles.
French Defense Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian, it's horrible pronunciation, told a French television channel today that France was supplying arms and providing aerial support, as well as offering tactical advice, but didn't mention a special forces deployment. So what did we learn from that statement today from the French foreign minister? The French commandos on the ground in Syria are supplying arms and aerial support and tactical advice. But who are they advising and arming? Say it together. ISIS.
Well, and the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman, Maria Zakharova, she said today that Turkey is supporting and directly supplying and commanding ISIS in the north of Aleppo.
Who said this?
This is the spokesman for the Russian Foreign Ministry. She gave a speech to the press in Moscow. She said, and this is her direct quote, According to mass media reports, up to 2,000 jihadists are taking part in the fighting. Journalists say Turkey's military advisors are commanding them.
You know, the Russians they could post photographs of the U.S. handing arms to ISIS. The U.S. news media would never acknowledge it. The U.S. news media will never tell the American people that the Obama administration switched sides. We are on a different side in the war on terror. We are now the terrorists.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's just weird, Doc, that this happened and the American people have accepted it and the Congress accepts it and the Pentagon accepts it.
I don't think the American people accept it. I think they don't know.
They don't know because, first of all, they're not told by the lying news media. But why is official Washington silent? They all know it. Every one of those clowns in Washington knows that the U.S. is arming ISIS. Why are they silent?
Maybe they're in a state of denial, or maybe they've accepted the military-industrial complex. Either way, it's treason and it's treachery against the soul. I mean, I couldn't live with knowledge like that, not say something about it.
Wall Street Journal reported yesterday that emails between U.S. diplomats in Islamabad and U.S. State Department officials in Washington about whether to challenge specific U.S. drone strikes in Pakistan are at the center of an FBI criminal probe involving Hillary Clinton's handling of classified information. The Wall Street Journal said the 2011 and 2012 emails were sent via the low side, government slang for a computer system for unclassified matters as part of a secret arrangement that gave the State Department more of a voice in whether a CIA drone strike went ahead, according to congressional and law enforcement officials briefed on the FBI side. The Journal said some of the emails were then forwarded by Hillary Clinton's aides to her personal email account, which routed them to a server she kept at home in suburban New York when she was Secretary of State. The emails, which did not mention the CIA or drones or details about the militant targets, were written within the often narrow time frame in which State Department officials had to decide whether or not to object to drone strikes before the CIA pulled the trigger, the official told the Wall Street Journal. Law enforcement and intelligence officials said State Department deliberations about the covert CIA drone program should have been conducted over secure government computer systems designed to handle classified information.
Well, duh. Yeah, it should have.
Like duh.
Of course it should have.
I mean, we're not talking about Hillary Clinton sending an email ordering lunch.
Right.
They're talking about drone strikes.
Killing people.
And she's doing it over her own private email server in her house. Hi, this is Rick Wiles. I'm sorry to interrupt today's edition of True News, but the censors at YouTube have silenced us. They are limiting True News to only 15 minutes per day. You can hear the full program by going to our website, truenews.com, TRUNEWS, truenews.com, or by downloading the True News app onto your smartphone or tablet. Thank you so much.